Yes, please.
Mr. Junaid Qureshi, the floor is yours now. Please go ahead.
Okay, I can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I couldn't hear you, so I didn't know that you gave me the floor. But thank you for Jamil Maksud. Thank you for organizing this conference at, of course, a very timely time. First of all, I would like to also express my support and sympathies to you for the fact that you are, of course, restricted in your activities because of the revocation of your passport. I've been told that you're fighting this case legally in the Islamabad High Court, and I'm sure that it will be taken to its logical conclusion, and we can then meet you again in places like Geneva, where we raise these issues. Well, thank you to all the speakers. I think everyone has made very valid points. Mr. Shaukat Kashmiri spoke about Islamophobia, so I will not touch that topic. I think he has elaborated that in a very, very good way. I will mainly focus a little bit on what has been told as the title of this conference is growing extremism in the region, of course, after the Taliban has taken over. What I do find necessary to say here is that after so many years, it seems that Europe has still not learned its lessons, because the thing is that Taliban is not a new phenomena. Taliban was in power in 1996. Taliban started emerging in Pakistan in the end of the 80s, in the beginning of the 90s, and it came out as a powerful group controlling almost 90% of Afghanistan in 1996. And except for some statements made by European countries about human rights and women's rights in Afghanistan and also in the US, not much was done. Afghanistan was left to the Taliban from 1996 until 2001, until 9/11 happened. It took 9/11 for Europe and the West to wake up, and then it was too late. So now 20 years later, of course, the senator and others have expressed their views about fears of terrorism growing in the region and also in Europe. But will Europe sit silent again? Will it wait for another 9/11? It shouldn't. What needs to be, Europe could learn from the experiences we Kashmiris have. And maybe Europe could step in before it hits places like Brussels and Paris and Amsterdam. Maybe history can teach us a lesson, because I said it a few days ago in the UN as well. Soviets left Afghanistan somewhere in 1989. And in 1989, a terrorist group like the Hizbul Mujahideen was founded. In 1987, Lashkar-e-Toiba was founded in Pakistan. And all these groups imposed terrorism, death and destruction on us Kashmiris, especially the Kashmiris living in the Indian administered part of Jammu and Kashmir. And like earlier was said by Mr. Shaukat Kashmiri, is that the Pakistan administered part of Kashmir was used as a launching pad. And nobody cared. No European stood up in the 1990s. No American stood up in the 1990s telling the world or telling the powers to be that the Kashmiris are being killed by intelligence agencies in Pakistan by using proxies as terrorist organizations. So I think the West can learn from our experiences. And since the last 30 years, the average Kashmiri has been fighting terrorism, has been demanding their rightful rights, their rightful human rights, while trying to disassociate itself from this imposed agenda exported from Rawalpindi and Islamabad. And now the fear is again the same, because then it was the Soviets who left, now it's the Americans who have left. So where will these terrorists go? And of course, I understand the concerns of the people sitting in Brussels, but Brussels is very far away. The Kashmiris have the first fears. The people living in Indian administered Kashmir, the people living in places in Pakistan, the people living in India, the people living in Afghanistan, those are the first targets. And we fear that because of the fact that the Pakistan military establishment would not like these terrorist groups to destabilize Pakistan itself, that history will repeat itself and these people will be rerouted to Kashmir again in order to, like they did in the 80s, in the end of the 80s, by, you know, their mantra of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts, of so-called trying to liberate Kashmir from infidels, all these mantras which they have used for terrorist organizations and to befool the international community and the Kashmiris itself. So we are the first line of in the first line of fire before they come to Europe. Recently, there was a statement by the Taliban spokesman who said that the Taliban has the right to speak about all Muslims, including Kashmir. We have nothing to do with the Taliban. We don't share anything with them. And I think the majority of the Afghans don't share anything with them. But this again is going to be imposed on the Kashmiri people. And I think that the best protection Europe and the West can do to protect itself is stand with the people, the democratic, secular forces in the region, especially in the conflict zones like Jammu and Kashmir, who oppose terrorism, who oppose the Taliban, because that is your best protection. You cannot build walls around Brussels and Paris. The only thing you need to do is to support those people in these regions to build walls to keep this terrorism out of their lands. That is where we need the help of the Western community and the Western people, because you want to prevent terrorism from taking root. You don't want to cure a terrorist attack, because then you're already too late. It has happened. So what we want from you, from powers to be, is to keep highlighting the fact that today the Taliban has taken over. It is a force to be reckoned with. It is supported by the benefactor next door, the state of Pakistan. It is supported by the military establishment. It is now almost fully in power. And when we hear things about we must not recognize them, yeah, we legitimize them with the Doha talks. We legitimize them by making a peace deal with a terrorist organization. You know, the Afghan government of Ashraf Ghani was sidelined. Nobody asked Ghani anything. Eventually, he had to flee. But it can't be this can't be the reality that the West has legitimized the Taliban on the Afghan people and are now talking about not accepting them and boycotting them. I think that's not going to the root of the cause. I think what you need to do is you need to sanction. You need to use punitive measures against states who sponsor terrorism. Boycotting the Taliban and not working together with them, I don't know whether that's the right decision. I think we need to keep engaging with democratic and secular forces in Afghanistan. We need to keep working for women's rights. We need to keep working for human rights there. And at the same time, we need to look at the root cause. And the root cause is the mindset of the military establishment sitting in Rawalpindi. And maybe it's now time to use punitive leverages against such countries who support terrorism and who use it as a state policy in order to gain strategic depth, or to safeguard their strategic interest in the region. That will not only help Europe, that will also help the Kashmiri people and make it more clearer to the world that the Kashmiris are fighting for their rights and they are not terrorists, because our whole rights movement have been hijacked by imposing terrorism on us. So what we really need to look at now is move forward from just condemning and words. We need to sanction. We need to, the FATF has put the state of Pakistan on a grey list for so many years because it's being protected by its elder brother China in the FATF. Well, we need to move forward from there. They need to maybe be blacklisted. We need to establish commissions or maybe investigative committees who look into how it's possible that with trillions of dollars, with the mightiest armed forces in the world, how is it possible that the Taliban came back 20 years later? That cannot have. No terrorist organization can support itself for a long time until and unless it is supported and nourished by a state. A terrorist organization needs money, needs weapons. Where do they get it from? Nobody can support paying their bills if you don't have a job. No terrorist organization can flourish this way unless and until it has a state backing them. And that is the root cause. So that is where we need to move towards, while also acknowledging the fact that there are other sufferers apart from the Afghan. The Afghan people have been suffering for 40 years. The Kashmiri people have been suffering for 75 years. The first terrorist attack in the region was the invasion of Jammu and Kashmir. And since then, we have been looking towards it. For the West, maybe the first terrorist attack was 9/11. Well, that's 50 years after 1947. Since then, we have been bearing the brunt in the region of these terrorists. And now it's the time for the world to also stand apart from the Afghans, to also stand with the people of Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Junaid Qureshi, for your comprehensive statement on the contemporary political and security situation evolving around the region and around the globe. And you have